From Kern Government Television, welcome to this week's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting, originating from the County Administrative Center located at 1115 Truxton Avenue, Bakersfield, California. Kern County's vision is to create and maintain a customer-centered county government designed to garner the confidence, support, and trust of the people we serve. Today's Kern County Board of Supervisors meeting will convene momentarily.
Board to reconvene. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Supervisor Peters.
Here.
Supervisor Scrivener. Supervisor Maggard.
Here.
Supervisor Couch.
Here.
Supervisor Perez. Supervisor Perez, can you hear us? Supervisor Perez, your phone is muted. If you would unmute your phone by pressing *6 so we can hear you.
Hi, Kathy, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, we will, good afternoon. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 9th meeting of the Board of Supervisors. We will first hear from County Counsel Margot Rizon for a report on actions taken in closed session.
Good afternoon, Chairman Peters, board members. As you know, this morning your board met to discuss item 55. However, there is no reportable action.
Thank you. The County of Kern has provided notice that as a result of the declared state, federal, and local emergencies that due to the COVID-19 pandemic and in light of the governor's orders, this Board of Supervisors meeting is not physically open to the public. Testimony and general public comment are accepted via email or voice message to the clerk of the board prior to today's meeting, and live comment via teleconference will be heard during the meeting. We'll begin by considering the consent agenda. All items listed with the CA or C above the item number are considered to be routine and non-controversial by county staff. The CA represents the consent agenda for the Board of Supervisors. The C represents the consent agenda for Kern Sanitation Authority and the Ford City Taft Heights Sanitation District. Consent items will be considered first and may be approved by one motion. If a member of the public wishes to comment or ask questions regarding an item on the consent agenda, they may do so prior to a vote being taken. A member of the board may remove any item from the consent agenda, and it will be considered in listed sequence with an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board concerning the item before action is taken. At this time, I'll read the consent agenda item numbers for the Board of Supervisors agenda. That is items 3, 5, and 6 on page 2, items 7 through 9 on page 3, items 10 through 17 on page 4, items 18 and 19, and 20 through 26 on page 5, 27 through 31 on page 6, and 32 through 36 on page 7. Madam Clerk, is there anybody wishing to address the board on consent agenda?
No, Mr. Chairman, we have no members of the public wishing to address the board on any consent agenda items.
Thank you. Are there any board members that would like to have any items removed for discussion?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Supervisor Peters.
Aye.
Supervisor Scrivener.
Aye.
Supervisor Maggard.
Aye.
Supervisor Couch.
Yes.
Supervisor Perez.
Yes.
Motion carried, all ayes.
Thank you. Okay, we'll now be considering item number 1, public presentations. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons to address the board on any matter not on this agenda, but under the jurisdiction of the board. Board members may respond briefly to statements made or questions posed. They may ask a question for clarification, make a referral to the staff for factual information, or request staff to report back to the board at a later meeting. Also, the board may take action to direct staff to place a matter on future agendas. Speakers are limited to 2 minutes. Please state and spell your name before making your presentation. Is there anybody wishing to speak during public comments, Madam Clerk?
Mr. Chairman, we have no members of the public online wishing to speak. However, we do have our Farm and Home Advisor, Brian Marsh, who would like to address your board, and he's
Great.
coming up to the podium.
Good afternoon, Mr. Marsh.
Dr. Brian Marsh, M-A-R-S-H. I listened to the discussion this morning and the presentation about the COVID response. I wanted to give two comments on that. One is as a recipient of the vaccine at the fairground. After finally getting through on the phone call, everything from there on was wonderful. Got the shot, took less than a half an hour at the fairground, including the 15 minutes of being watched over so I didn't faint, die, pass out, whatever. I was concerned about getting the second shot, but I have received a phone call from the health department scheduling that 10 days out, so that the process is wonderful. Kudos to the people who put together the process. Extra kudos to the people who are implementing it. There was even a department head there doing a seemingly insignificant job of handing me a clipboard and pointing which direction to go. So extra kudos to those people. The other comment I wanted to make about after listening to the discussion, especially between Supervisor Scribner and Maggard, using statistics of death for driving which populations should be receiving the vaccine, not a problem with that. But there's another segment of our population that is at extreme risk, and we don't have any statistics that track that. And that is our young people who are not in school. They are experiencing some mental and emotional difficulties because they are not in school. And to keep this short, I just encourage you as you're having further discussions about that to think about our educators, the people who are in school, priority for vaccines so that our young people can get back to school. They desperately need it. This is especially true for some of the minority students who are also receiving a lot of their nutrition and support in the schools. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, with no other comments, we will be moving to item number 2, which is board member announcements or reports. Supervisor Couch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank the board and the staff on, we just adopted item 9 on the consent calendar, and that established an affiliation with Keep America Beautiful, and it established Keep Kern Beautiful and some bylaws. And I know that sounds like a simple thing, but it took a while, and there was a lot of details to work out. And I just want to thank our public works staff for doing that, and thank the board for supporting that. That was a goal that we established a few years ago, and we just got it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Any other comments or reports from the board? Okay, our next item on the agenda is number 4 under the Planning and Natural Resources Department. That is a request for position of support and participation for the unincorporated community of Lamont for inclusion into the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program 2020 Community Selection by the California Air Resources Board and San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District. Ms. Oviatt.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. This item, as you note, is an item related to Assembly Bill 617. It is a request that you support the inclusion of and the selection of the City of Arvin and the unincorporated community of Lamont for the 2020 Community Air Protection Plan under AB 617 by the California Air Resources Board. So Assembly Bill 617 requires the California Air Resources Board and the San Joaquin Valley Air District, as well as other air districts, to develop and implement additional emissions reporting, monitoring, reduction plans, and measures in an effort to reduce air pollution exposure in a disadvantaged community. This is a neighborhood level, community level process where stakeholders come together. The county has participated in the one that the city of Shafter did, and Fresno is the other community that has participated in this in the San Joaquin Valley. The city of Arvin and the unincorporated communities of Lamont are on the finalist list this year. That has taken that they have been on that list for 3 years, and we do believe that this year, along with other very worthy communities in Southern California and Northern California, which are in the report I've given you, are going to be considered at the February 25th California Air Resources Board meeting. Therefore, the planning department, in reviewing that report and in looking at the amount of work that has gone into our local environmental justice groups as well as community organizers, we do believe this is the next community that should be selected by CARB. I provided you 2 emails. One is from the representatives of the Central California Environmental Justice Network, thanking you for this request and asking that you make it, as well as the Committee for Better Arvin. In addition, I do believe we have representatives from that organization, Committees for Better Arvin, on the line to speak, as well as representatives of our Farm Bureau who can express their support for the selection. What actually happens at the end of this process is that the state of California has already appropriated millions of dollars of mitigation money that goes into these communities. This process is intended to identify how should that money be used at a very local level to support those disadvantaged communities. It also provides policy direction for your board to consider, and in regards to what kinds of industries, what kinds of changes should we make around those communities. This letter of support also designates my department and my representation to be part of that stakeholding, and we would be sending that up to the Air Resources Board. Available for questions, we have provided you with the full report so that you can understand how the selections are made and who else is on this finalist list from Southern California. But it is recommended that your board support the AB 617 selection of Lamont in the city of Arvin and direct the Planning and Natural Resources Department to participate in this program and authorize the chair to sign.
Okay, thank you very much. There we go. Thank you very much, Ms. Oviatt. Madam Clerk, are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we do have 4 members of the public in the queue ready to address your board. We're going to start with Ms. Taylor Roshan. Ms. Roshan, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Hi, this is Taylor. Hi, I'm sorry about that. This is Taylor Roshan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, wonderful. Sorry. Good afternoon, Taylor Roshan. I'm with the California Farm Bureau. It's TAYLORROSCHEN. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to make a public comment today. I wanted to express California Farm Bureau's support for the county's participation in the 617 process. I hesitate to even comment in this forum, as clearly Kern County Farm Bureau is well appointed to do so. But I do feel obligated because I wanted to advise the board that there were some challenges to implementing 617 in the community of Shafter. And I think in part that's because statewide organizations with statewide policy intentions became involved. 617 was crafted to and should be a community-driven process. And so it's my goal that that Shafter issue not be repeated here. In my experience, that can really be best mitigated by ensuring the process is locally driven, by local voices reflective of the entire community on steering committees and in stakeholder engagement. So I encourage the board to just monitor this process to make sure that's the foundational principle. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Roshan.
Next, we're going to hear from John Moore. Mr. Moore, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Hi there.
Hey, we can hear you, John.
Great. Thank you all. This is John Moore. That's JOHNMOORE. I'm the president of the Kern County Farm Bureau representing the agricultural community. Thank you, Chairman, board members, and staff for allowing me the opportunity to speak on behalf of agriculture. The county of Kern's familiarity with its communities, knowledge of geographic pitfalls, well, as they relate to air quality, particular valley towns, make for its involvement with the AB 617 process critical, as we've seen thus far. A nonpartisan, non-agenda-driven body will be the most successful at facilitating conversation regarding this complex issue, as showcased in the deliberations in Shafter, which have been complex to say the least. Subject areas concern are surrounded and supported by production farming and food processing. The communities noted today contribute to and depend on agricultural members and organizations as economic partners. So I want to make sure to note that the community members are those within ag. In order to exhibit an equitable process and I think eventually successful conclusion, stakeholders from within the unincorporated area and city of Arvin should be represented. This includes community members, local residents, and agricultural representatives as those representatives live, work, and employ within the subject areas. So once again, thank you from the Kern County Farm Bureau, and we support and commend the county on its support with the AB 617 process, and look forward to coordinating with all of you and the various members in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Next, we have Jenny Holterman on the line. Mrs. Holterman, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Oh, this is, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, this is Jenny Holterman. It's Jenny. Holterman is Holtermann. I am a farmer in the Shafter area, and I wanted to comment today to support the county in this process and confirm that agriculture maintains and would receive representation on the AB 617 steering committee for the cities of Arvin and Lamont. Unfortunately, I am a farmer in the Shafter area, and I live outside the city limits, and I was denied access to serve on the 617 committee for Shafter because I live outside the city limits. So unfortunately, the committee passed a series of recommendations to further limit the agriculture involvement around the committee, around the city. So unfortunately, I was not able to participate in the committee process, but I am further being limited on my agriculture activities because of the committee. So I would strongly encourage the county to ensure that agriculture is represented in the Arvin and Lamont process so that this does not happen. Agriculture should have a seat at the table if we are being forced and regulated and told what we can and can't do around the city. Agriculture should have that representation, and I would strongly encourage you all to have that equal representation of things that will be impacted from these committee processes. So I appreciate your time today, and further enforce that the whole community be involved in this process, and the community that will be impacted needs to be involved in this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holterman.
And the last speaker we have in the queue is Bianca Santoyo. Ms. Santoyo, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi. I actually have a comment from a resident from Comité Progreso de Lamont, Sayana and Jose Mireles. And I also have a comment for myself. We weren't able to send you the comments, but I wanted to first address Jose and Diana Mireles' comments. In support, wanting to thank you for the support of supporting Lamont in the AB 617 in this whole process. These are residents that have been working throughout this process for more than 4 years, and they've seen the process that happened in Shafter, and are happy that the supervisors are in support of this process because they would help reduce contaminations, air emission contaminations in their communities. So this is something that would benefit in their communities. This is what would bring monitors and incentives for their communities and projects that could benefit residents. And we'll wanted to thank you. And my name is Bianca Santoyo. I am a community organizer for Center Race Poverty and the Environment, also resident from Arvin, and also part of the steering committee of Shafter for the AB 617. So I was one of the selected personnel that were in the steering committee, and at the moment is still sitting there. I've been in the process at the moment, and I've seen the whole process, how it's played in Shafter, and how the industry has tried to take control over the process. And now that it's happening in Arvin and Lamont, we are trying to help community members, leaders in the community to amplify their voices and bring their voices and their concerns to the table. So we are very happy that the Board of Supervisors are here in support of this process, because this is a resident process. This is not a industry process. This is not a industry process that is actually going to benefit the industry. It's going to benefit the residents. So I am very happy that the Board of Supervisors that are here in support for this process, and thankful for that. And also, I do wanted to address a comment from prior that many of the agricultures were targeted. In contrary, we were trying to reduce the emissions that many of the industry for many years have done for many years, and now it's time to clean up the air. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Santoyo.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes public comment on this item.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Are there any board member comments or questions?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Supervisor Couch?
I want to thank our planning department, but I want the public to know that I and my staff in my office have been very involved in the AB 617 process, specifically in Shafter. And I want to ask Director Oviatt if she would like to comment on some of the comments that were given. And I'd ask you to comment on, the participation in the different committee meetings, and also sort of but the scope of AB 617 for the benefit of those listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch, through the chair. We appreciate the design of AB 617. I would note that the City of Shafter's process was one of the first processes that was actually accomplished. The City of Shafter was selected, but they then determined with their stakeholders, who did not include the unincorporated representatives, to expand the impact analysis onto unincorporated communities that were not represented. I believe that the Air District and CARB has now reevaluated what happened in that particular process. And we have been assured that just as all processes evolve, we are just, government implementers here. And when you do the first one, then you look to see what worked and didn't work. And so we believe that we have now identified that if you're going to include an unincorporated community like Lamont, you must actually say that and have representation. So that is why we are here today. The original proposal was the City of Arvin. The city then said there are these impacts outside of us. We want to include them. Our point is, if a community is included, they should have representation. I appreciate that I have provided your board with a chair letter. I would like to amend that chair letter that has been attached to your staff report. I will provide this to the clerk afterwards, to actually add a sentence that said, the board supports representation on the stakeholder group should include all community members, including individual farmers and other property owners. So we want to be inclusive, that it's not, quote, just residents, people who live in the houses. Property owners also should have say into this. And we are not talking about industries. We are talking about the property owners and the people who live in those communities and work in those communities. And I think with that inclusion of an expanded sentence, we can capture the concerns that individual farmers have. Yes, they may not have a house there, but they have a business interest. That is very different than what we were talking about where, quote, an industry that actually is, represented in Sacramento or represented someplace else comes into the community. A community means businesses that are there, property owners and what they're interested in doing, and residents. That is who can make a difference in cleaning up our air and cleaning up our communities, and they should all have a say in this. That's my recommendation to your board.
Well, I would appreciate that, and I appreciate your comments, and I would make a motion on staff's recommendation with the inclusion that the director just mentioned of that sentence into the letter to be signed by the chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Are there any other comments on this? Or is there a second for the motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Matt. Okay, Supervisor Perez, is there anything you wish to add before we move on? Hello, Supervisor Perez?
I don't know who that was. That wasn't me, but no, I don't have any.
Okay, you got it. Thanks. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Supervisor Peters?
Aye.
Supervisor Scrivener?
Aye.
Supervisor Maggard?
Aye.
Supervisor Couch?
Yes.
Supervisor Perez?
Yes.
Motion carries, all ayes.
Okay, thank you. Our next item is item number 20 under the County Administrative Office, and that is response to the January 26, 2021 request of Supervisor Maggard to draft letters of support for the new Veterans Clinic site in Bakersfield. And I would like to call on Mr. Alsop to provide the staff's report on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Thomas Brown of our office will provide your board the report on this item.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The item before you is a response to requests for letters of support for the proposed new Veterans Clinic site located near Olive and Knutson Drive in Bakersfield. For background, Congress authorized the construction of a new Veterans Clinic in Bakersfield in 2010. In 2018, a lease was awarded by the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs to SASD Development Group to construct a new facility. In May 2020, SASD submitted a site plan review application to the city of Bakersfield to construct a new 39,000 square foot VA medical outpatient clinic at 5512 Knutson Drive. The clinic is designed to provide primary care and is expected to have the capacity for some specialty care to include subspecialty clinics and ancillary and diagnostic services. As part of the site plan review, city staff determined that a mitigated negative declaration was the appropriate environmental document for compliance with CEQA. On January 7th, 2021, the City of Bakersfield Planning Commission adopted the mitigated negative declaration, and the Development Services Department approved the site plan review application the following day, January 8th, 2021. On January 15th, 2021, Hagen Law Group appealed both the mitigated negative declaration and the site plan review. Hagen Law Group represents Progress for Bakersfield Veterans, LLC, which is the owner and operator of the existing VA clinic located on Westwind Drive. City staff scheduled the site plan review appeal for the February 4th Planning Commission meeting. Staff recommended the denial of the site plan review appeal at that meeting, and the Planning Commission concurred with staff denying the appeal by Hagen Law Group. The mitigated negative declaration appeal is tentatively scheduled for consideration by the City Council in March 2021. The overarching goal of the proposed project is to develop a facility that focuses on patient convenience, safety, and a healing environment that is in conformance with the VA's mission to provide quality care to our veterans. The project has been in the planning phase for nearly 11 years, and many in our community feel the project is long overdue. Staff's recommended action for your board is to adopt a position in support of the proposed letters for the new VA clinic site and to authorize the chairman to sign correspondence to the appropriate officials. That concludes staff's prepared comments. We're available for any questions your board may have.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Are there any comments from the board? Supervisor Maggard?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, staff, for helping us put this letter together. It's my understanding that last week the City Planning Commission met and they denied the appeal, as I understand it. Is that right, Mr. Brown?
That's correct, Supervisor Maggard, through the chair. They sided with staff, and that was on February 4th. The staff recommended the denial of the site plan review appeal, and the Planning Commission concurred with that request.
Very good. Well, I appreciate you guys putting the letter together. It's, I think, very appropriate for us to be supportive of the new VA clinic being constructed, and it will add significantly to the depth and breadth of services that our local veterans can receive locally, and I'm just grateful for that opportunity. So I would be glad to motion that we approve the letter and thank staff for their assistance.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. Supervisor Cow?
Second.
Oh, Madam Clerk, before we take that vote, do we have any public comment on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have not received any requests for public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. With that, we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Supervisor Peters?
Aye.
Supervisor Scrivener?
Aye.
Supervisor Maggard?
Aye.
Supervisor Couch?
Yes.
Supervisor Perez?
Yes.
Motion carries, all ayes.
Thank you. Our next item is item number 21 under the County Administrative Office. That is a proposed realignment of countywide networking and server infrastructure and staff under the leadership of Information Technology Services Division of the County Administrative Office. And I would like to call on Mr. Alsop for a staff report on this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Joining me today in the presentation will be Mr. Jim Zervis, our Chief Operations Officer, and Mr. Mac Avancina, our Chief Technology Officer, along with our CFO, Elsa Martinez. The item before you this afternoon deals specifically with the proposed change that's being recommended by my office for the realignment of county-wide IT networking and server infrastructure functions under the direction of Information Technology Services and our Chief Information Technology Officer, Mr. Mac Avancina. Nearly 80% of county departments have these functions centralized under the direction of our Chief Information Technology Officer. This proposed change, which is limited in scope, impacts just 13 currently filled IT networking and server infrastructure staff positions that continue to operate independent of county-wide information technology services in 5 of our county departments. County of Kern has a distinction of being among just a handful of California counties that continue to operate these networking and infrastructure IT positions in a decentralized manner, which is not a best practice. In other words, we are among the few where these network and infrastructure positions are not aligned under the direction of a central enterprise-wide IT professional who is held accountable for the network and system security, continuity, redundancy, planning, cross-training, procurement, and leadership of those functions. The current system we are operating under is not only a major countywide network system security vulnerability, but also hinders our county's ability to develop and build IT network and systems capabilities and staffing critically needed to evolve and move forward on a $3 billion business and organization of 8,000 employees. I know we have slides that are not up. So our slide deck, you know, this item is about, you know, it's a recommendation coming from your CAO's office, and your CAO serves a function here in the county that's not always easy, and particularly when, you know, we've got different department heads, all of our department heads reporting independently to the board, but nonetheless, your board relies on the CAO's office to provide continuity across various different functions, dipping into different business areas of the county on an as-needed basis, whether it's you know, financial related, workforce, labor related, other related things. The best part about our system is we have great department heads that are highly capable, and it's my pleasure to support them and to do everything I can along with my staff to make them successful in their operations. The Chief Administrative Office function, there are a variety of duties that you assign me and task me with and hold me accountable for. They run A through O or P, but I've put a couple here, a few to provide context to this particular item. On A, you can see where you hold me accountable to report to the board regarding the manner in which county administrative, fiscal, and ethical compliance policies and directives are carried out by the departments, services, boards, commissions, and institutions of the county, and make recommendations for the enforcement, modification, and augmentation thereof. And B, you want me and hold me accountable to perform continuous research, investigation, and analysis of administrative practices and procedures, work processes, and work methods for the improvement of efficiency, organization, economy of operation, program service effectiveness, customer responsiveness, et cetera. And in L, and specific to this item, you hold me accountable for managing the data processing and information technology, automation, and central support services provided through the Information Technology Services Division, and to advise your board regarding the optimum use of data processing personnel, facilities, and equipment. Next slide. And to ensure that we are performing adequately and to your expectation across all the duties that you assign your Chief Administrative Officer, we want to make sure that we hire good people. But we do have, your board has put into county ordinance the request of all departments that they assist our office in performing our duties that I just talked about. That's a provision that's unique to the CAO's office within the structure that we currently operate in, and I've never had any issues from anybody on this. It's always been a great team effort, but that is there to assist in helping me perform the duties that you're holding me accountable to perform. Next slide, please. So in order to get those things done, in order to proceed as your CAO and to do the things that you're holding me accountable to do, I need to make sure that we're hiring the best people to perform in a variety of different functions across our business area. One of those is IT. We recently hired, and we're lucky enough to get Mr. Mac Avancina from the private sector, who has 28 years of IT experience running worldwide global infrastructure, technology services, and networking systems for NBC Universal, a highly accountable position, doing very important work, where he's held positions as a senior director for project management, and he was the director of infrastructure technology there at NBC Universal. He's got a ton of other private sector experience. If that wasn't enough, he's got great education and certification, an MBA on operations and supply chain management, which I think is relevant here, along with his BA and certification from Caltech. So we want to make sure that in performing our duties as the CAO for your board across all of our areas that we're managing, IT being one, we want to make sure we have excellent leadership. And I want to make sure that the person we're hiring knows more about IT than anybody here in the county. And I believe Mac is that person. He is a thought leader for other counties. He serves on a committee for CSAC to provide counsel and leadership to county IT directors across the state. He's got a green belt, Lean Six Sigma from GE. He's the guy for the job, and we're happy to have him. So I'm going to turn this over to Jim Zerfus and Mac to walk through some of the details of this proposed change.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman and members of the board. There's been a lengthy process leading up to this point, and I'd like to start by clarifying what is being recommended here today and what is not. It is being recommended that your board approve the realignment of the remaining outlying countywide IT infrastructure and operation functions to the Countywide Information Technology Services Division, or ITS. This is a relatively small number. Across the county, almost 80% of these services are already provided by ITS. This action would align the remaining 20%, impacting 13 employees and 1 vacant position across 6 departments. This is the extent of what is being recommended. There are no additional positions or functions being impacted. These realigned employees would report to ITS, but would be at 100% dedicated to supporting their existing departments, and as a result, there is no material financial impact of this realignment on the impacted departments. Over the course of many years, countywide IT resources have grown and developed in many cases independently across multiple departments throughout the county. This has been done for a variety of reasons, of business reasons, as technology has continued to advance and understandably to meet the needs of their individual departments they serve. While this has worked in the past, today IT is a big business and plays an ever more critical role across our organization. Some functions are department-specific and very customer-facing, while other aspects of IT are more of a utility function, ensuring things like connectivity and communication, similar to the piping in a water distribution system. It's these utility functions that we're talking about today. This IT function, this IT infrastructure and communications area is ever-evolving and complex in nature. This technical complexity will only increase over time and is best managed in a systematic and cohesive fashion with professional expertise across our entire organization. This county, our organization, is over a $3 billion entity with over 8,000 employees. While we may be made up of several departments, we are in fact one organization. IT is critical to the success of our business and carries with it significant opportunities and risks. An organization of our size should be employing a comprehensive strategy, driving strategic investment in technology. We need a unified vision and plan for our IT future. We should be employing industry-wide best practices in a comprehensive fashion. We need to be recruiting, hiring, training, and developing IT employees to advance this strategy and provide ongoing employee growth opportunities. And we must be taking a centralized approach to ensuring the security of our information and systems. This is a common best practice in the public sector as well as government. Similarly, no one would argue that each department of the county should manage its own investment pool or have its own bank accounts. This would bring with it significant risk and be less efficient. No, we have these functions centralized with the treasurer tax collector. No one would argue that each department needs to do all of its own accounting or produce its own financial statements. No, we have those functions centralized with the auditor controller. Yet our county has a countywide division of information technology services, but some departments maintain completely separate IT personnel and systems. It is in this vein that the CAO's office has been working to realign many of our decentralized IT functions under its own countywide ITS. Much of this has been accomplished over the past few years under the expert leadership of your Chief Information Technology Officer, Mac Avancina, and the cooperation of various department heads. This past June, we started the process of expanding this effort to include additional departmental IT functions. Originally, this included the realignment of both customer-facing functions as well as infrastructure and operation functions in a number of departments. This included roughly 112 IT positions countywide that were outside of ITS. Beginning in July, we engaged in a series of meetings with all impacted departments. In these meetings, we discussed specific concerns from those departments. Hearing those concerns, we modified our original approach to be a phased plan, with phase 1 dealing with this infrastructure and operations, phase 2 dealing with business relationship management or those customer-facing IT functions for smaller departments, and phase 3 dealing with those customer-facing IT functions for larger departments. In August, we continued with another set of meetings and discussions with impacted departments. Following these collective meetings, we met with specific departments at their request for further discussion. This also included lengthy detailed written responses to questions and follow-up information, including written service level agreements and documentation at the request of those departments. Following these meetings and communications, and in direct response to the additional concerns raised by some department heads, the scope of this realignment was again amended. This time to only include infrastructure and operations with no additional phases. The business relationship management component was removed altogether from the scope. This change was communicated in writing to all impacted department heads, which was followed by a series of questions and comments by email. To date, all questions posed by the impacted departments have been answered. While I recognize that this process may have gotten off to an abrupt start, over the past 7 months, there has been significant communication regarding this project with all impacted departments. At the same time, discussions regarding the impact on employees have been held with respective bargaining units. As you can see, we've been working diligently with the impacted department heads to address their concerns, and based directly on their feedback, we have modified the scope of this effort twice. The most significant change being the limiting of this realignment to only infrastructure and operations functions. This change reduced the scope, reduced the impacted positions from 112 to 14. That's an 87.5% reduction in scope. Additional changes were made to eliminate the pooling and sharing of employee resources, again, to directly address concerns of the impacted department heads. Additionally, some concerns were raised by the departments were focused on the ITS organization and its history, not on the merits of this realignment effort. Having these concerns come to light is helpful, and ITS is committed to and has already begun taking steps to improve customer confidence and customer satisfaction levels. What is now being recommended is a small fraction, 14 positions, 12.5% of what was originally proposed, and includes only those things that are of the most urgent need to address security, efficiency, and best practices in the utility-based functions of our countywide IT. Mac Avancina, your Chief Information Technology Officer, is now going to discuss some of the technical aspects of the proposed realignment in more detail.
Good afternoon, Chairman Peters and members of the board. What I'd like to review here is a couple pictures of where we stand with security today. What you see are articles of different public sector organizations and their security incidents. We've heard about Shafter in our own backyard and how that's impacted resident access to government. I'd like to highlight Contra Costa Library. In January 2020 and February 2020, they were impacted with a security incident, rendering all of their libraries unavailable for the public. In June 2020, UCSF School of Medicine paid a ransom of $1.14 million to their threat actors so that they could recover their data consisting of health records and PII identifiable information. And most notably in May 2019, in the city of Baltimore, they spent $18 million and counting on recovery costs after refusing to pay ransom. And all three security incidents occurred in a non-centralized IT environment. Here are the facts concerning government agencies. Cities and counties are the new hospitals. Local governments are being increasingly targeted and trending. Without centralized communication, we can't contain the attack and work towards proper response, risking more access for those threat actors. We are wrangling with different teams, different priorities, and responsibilities today. What we've learned from hospitals and other public agency attacks is that upgrading and investing in technology isn't enough. Leadership matters and ownership matters. What you have here is a snippet of data points from a Deloitte NASCO study on cybersecurity. What's being proposed is a direction using best practices implemented by peers across our overall technology industry. COVID has challenged continuity and amplified gaps. It's forced us how to accept and invest in technology. And through your board's actions, we've accelerated our digital transformation by 5 to 10 years. We've fundamentally changed IT, yet we're relying on decades-old practices to run IT. In the end, this is a strategy that reduces complexity in an increasing complex landscape and ultimately helps our county. My truth is this: we are processing information and consuming information like never before. Velocity, veracity, volume. That's changed our playing field. And if you take a look at what these think tanks and other leaders within the industry are reporting, is that there is strength in having consistency in numbers. There is strength in being able to have a centralized budget. And there is strength in being able to cross-train and upskilling our resources so that they can provide, in addition to more career growth opportunities, a better representation of how we manage these ongoing risks. And this is why we believe that realigning network, server, telecommunication infrastructure, and staff under the leadership of Information Technology Services is of critical importance for our mission to serve Kern County. The table highlights the affected departments. Both Ryan and Jim had indicated there are a total of 13 staff members impacted. I can tell you that if we are serious about fostering a culture of innovation, if we are serious about being a thought leader in excellence in managing our businesses and our people, then my recommendation is that we look deeply into how we're running IT. And if I'm guilty of anything, I'm changing culture. I am guilty of believing that IT needs to run like a business and not like a commodity service. And with that, that concludes our presentation.
Okay, thank you, sir. With that, Madam Clerk, is there any members of the public that are wishing to speak to this matter?
Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I do have, you have been provided with emails that were received and forwarded. We also have 3 voice messages that we're going to play. One is from Rochelle Hunt, another from Aaron Nance, and a 3rd voice message from Denise Clark. We'll play those first.
Okay, thank you.
This is for the 2 p.m. session concerning agenda item 21. My name is Rochelle Hunt, R-A-C-H-E-L-L-E-H-U-N-T. I'm a technology services supervisor with the Department of Human Services. I am concerned about the proposed IT realignment as this change could adversely affect the services to the community, and it will not be mutually beneficial to DHS specifically because of the uniqueness of the network infrastructure, the volume of end users that DHS support, and the scope of services performed by the staff that are affected by this merger. DHS IT staff support 3 autonomous networks, 2 of which are managed by the state or state consortium. The networking equipment used at DHS is unique, and it requires the knowledge of a specific syntax, and replacing this equipment to match what ITS is using would be costly. DHS IT staff support over 2,000 end users. Due to the agreement with the consortium, DHS uses a proprietary help desk ticketing system. DHS help desk operations is split into 4 separated call centers to handle the various support calls for the systems we support. It would not be in the best interest of DHS to disrupt this already streamlined process. The service level agreements that ITS provided to DHS for the LAN and network services raise concern that ITS is not prepared to provide the level of service and support required by DHS. The level of impact a system disruption or outage has is defined in the SLA by how many county departments are affected rather than by its department function or critical services provided to the community. As it is written now, the SLA would require a response to an outage of the CPS emergency hotline of 1 business day, as it would affect only 1 department. This is not acceptable. The staff that would be moving under ITS are responsible for IT-related duties that fall outside the scope of the work defined in the SLAs. It is mentioned that service fees would be charged for additional services, but that would not benefit the department, as it doesn't cost anything additional to have those duties performed now. I'm asking the board to consider all information provided before moving forward with an approval. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aaron Nance, A-A-R-O-N-N-A-N-C-E, and I'm leaving a comment on PM session item 21. Hi, my name is Aaron Nance. I'm a technology services manager in ITS with just under 20 years of service to the county. The first 16 years of my employment were spent in the Public Services Building, providing IT needs as the Development Services Agency, a shadow IT team serving the staff of the PSB. Every couple of years, the rumor that ITS was going to consolidate us would circulate, and it would scare us. We were afraid of it, and we thought it'd be a terrible thing. Then, right about 3 years ago, that rumor became reality, and the PSB IT team was consolidated into ITS. I feel it's important for this board to know that my experiences these last 3 years with ITS have been amazing. My worries and fears were completely unfounded. The ITS staff welcomed and trusted me from day one. The opposition you hear today will mostly be based in similar worries and fears. Please consider my example and that of the PSB IT team as you hear today's topic. Thank you.
The following comment is in response to item 21 on the afternoon agenda. My name is Denise Clark, D-E-N-I-S-E-C-L-A-R-K. I am a systems analyst with the Department of Human Services. The proposed realignment is very troubling to me in regards to staffing. You state that all realigned staff will continue to be dedicated 100% to the department from which they are being realigned, but then you turn around and state that any out-of-class duties currently being performed will revert back to staff at the originating department. The duties that you may classify as out of classification or outside of scope have always been considered as part of the, quote, other duties as assigned, unquote, portion of all of our job descriptions. Those duties are related in some way to the main tasks associated with those positions. This will mean assigning those tasks to staff that have already been assigned duties that were left unassigned when positions were vacated and not being filled due to the recent retirement package offered to some. If positions that were left unfilled to meet budgeting requirements are to be filled, this will have a direct impact on the current budget. My biggest concern with reassigning these duties to other staff is that it will mean a delay with any requests or projects assigned. In the case of DHS, this will have a direct impact on the level of service we provide not only to staff, but to the public. Please consider this and all concerns before making a decision on this item. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to confirm receipt of an email, a letter from Kern County Firefighters Union from Dave Nelson. You also received an email from Jeff Bailey and an email from Sonia Bennett. In addition to that, we have one member of the public who would like to address your board, Michael Turnipseed. Mr. Turnipseed, if you would unmute your phone by pressing *6, you may address the board.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board.
Good afternoon, Mike.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Michael Turnipseed, representing the Kern County Taxpayers Association. Kern Tax unequivocally supports the centralization of the IT service. We spent a lot of time in talking about innovative things. What does this do? It helps with risk mitigation, standardization across the enterprise, efficiency gains, cost benefits, and provides security and sustainability to your IT system. Let's think about back to the 1990s when our system was built. Pete Parra was on the Board of Supervisors then. And during the 1990s, 3 iconic corporations really disappeared from relevance because they did not address the rapid change in technology. BlackBerry thought everybody was going to drive to the neighborhood store and pick up tapes and return them. Blockbuster, the largest film library in the world, had no idea, actually Blockbuster, that this was happening and be streaming of movies. BlackBerry, who still builds the most secure phone in the world, did not adapt to consumer needs, figuring that people wanted to watch video, play games, and all the other things on their phone. And the institutional name of Kodak thought that film would last forever and digital photography was just a phase. We depend absolutely on outdated technology. The action today is not an option, it's a necessity. The county has concentrated many other services like human relations and legal services and accounting. This is imperative they do it for IT. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Turnipseed.
Mr. Chairman, that concludes public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members or any members of the public or in the audience that are wishing to speak to the board?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board.
Good afternoon.
I'm Dina Murphy, your department head for Human Services. Obviously, the largest number of individuals are represented there to move from my department. So I'd like to first apologize for having to have this discussion in public session because I'm not in concurrence. I do have concerns, and while I embrace change and technology, and I'd like to demonstrate my support going back to 2001 and being part of the Technical Advisory Committee. And in fact, in the first paragraph of the letter that was submitted to you from the CAO, he references a third-party assessment that was done and a basis for part of why he's moving forward with this hybrid centralization. And I say hybrid because Sheriff's Department and Child Support are not included in this. But I really felt strongly that we should embrace technology, and since 2001 have served on that board, but also served on the committee performing this assessment with Jeanette Pell, who was the former, in Mac's former position, the technology manager, but then served as a contractor into the future. This Technology Advisory Committee assessment really embraced the opportunities that we have as communities of interest, with all departments included in decision subcommittee meetings, coordination of purchases, policies, procedures for many, many years. And in this final assessment that was done and submitted late 2016, this was not a recommendation for centralizing. It was a recommendation, one of many, for investigating initiatives, if you will. One of those initiatives was Google, and we were all excited to move to a new platform. It ended up that was actually a security challenge. We had to move swiftly and make a decision to stay with Microsoft, but after a year investment and doing due diligence, we realized that the security issue wouldn't carry. It was one of many initiatives in this assessment. Once the former CAO retired, we have not convened as a group. That is something that the group of individuals, department heads, really feel strongly about continuing to meet as a TAC group, looking at the leadership which rested in the past with department heads, but surfacing unintended consequences and issues for departments of all sizes, because there are scalability issues, and while the CAO will point to efficiencies in the 70+% of departments that are now being centralized and led centrally, there are opportunities that we are missing with drops in communication, most certainly. I wanted to speak to you about security because that is foremost on our minds always. For 20+ years, the Department of Human Services has had Checkpoint. The model that Kern County currently uses with hub and spoke is one of the best practices as well. The CAO referred to a handful of departments within the state of California who still use this model. One of those is San Francisco. Another is Los Angeles County Public Assistance, which is massive. They report directly to their Department of Human Service directors, along with other counties, San Joaquin, Sonoma, Santa Cruz. There are a handful of counties. There are several counties. So I wanted to share that with you so that you wouldn't feel or believe that all counties operating as we do now are not of a larger size or are not sophisticated. And truly, the strength that's been provided in the parameter being secured with Checkpoint, along with other county departments and some of their security measures, has been a benefit to the county. I'm not saying that there's not opportunity for efficiencies and forward movement, but that is what I've been committed to for my career, really trying to move the county forward to a more efficient environment. And I think currently that there are challenges that we're experiencing that haven't been surfaced or haven't been addressed. And I think we need to address what isn't working before we turn around and take productive moving departments into an environment where we're going to be challenged to meet our needs, really, because we're looking at layers and call-in systems and putting phone tags in for a call back to fix something. And that's not the manner in which Human Services works. We are 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in the protection of children. Yes, there's public service, but there's also the children's end of the branch. And it's of concern to me that we will have challenges or losses in our dollars if we have further increase in costs. An explanation. When I met with our assistant CAO and our IT manager virtually in July, I had requested a written plan and also an itemized sheet of costs, something to represent the methodology in which those costs, which I did not receive either. Part of our requirement for Human Services within the state of California is that we have a written memorandum of understanding with detailed duties documented and methodologies attached to that for approval. That's part of how, well, a big part of how we receive our state and federal funding, and without being in jeopardy, because they have to approve that methodology in advance of you just billing and saying everything is the same. And I know that there's the comment that there will be no additional charges, but my questions are not all answered in that realm. I have a supervisor who supervises more than 5 people now, and their span of control is much larger, and yet there's conversation about moving them over to the Mount Vernon location and then having them supervise just 5 people. And that doesn't make sense when we're in an environment where there have been inconsistencies in the sales office and their staff referring to shared and pooled resources. And we went from totally shared and pooled resources in that first meeting in July to September having a first conversation about eliminating the BRMs, the business resource managers, and looking at only network, and at that point still shared, into an October communication with looking at dedicated staff that would be moved and then cover some county-wide needs or responsibilities, to a November department head meeting where I specifically asked, this IT item was not on the agenda, I specifically asked our CAO, do you intend to move my networking staff, which is about 26% of my internal IT staff, do you intend on moving them to Mount Vernon? Yes, ma'am. Do you intend on using my IT resources as a shared resource? Yes, ma'am. So fast forward to January, and there's a communication from the CAO that says staff will be dedicated to department heads or to their departments. And then a little deeper into the communication, there's coverage for departures, there's coverage for vacations, et cetera. So you slide right back into that shared resource. Now, on the very same day that I received the communication from the CAO, that letter about dedicated services, I'd had a conversation with the president of the California Welfare Directors Association, and she said, you can't sign a claim under penalty of perjury with shared resources. There are no shared resources for social service realignment dollars or anywhere in the state of California that there are shared resources, which would be a quandary because signing the claim means $55 million a quarter to our county, and I would never hurt our county, but I also can't sign under penalty of perjury, so I could abate those individuals from the claim, which is roughly $900,000, and that is about 7 to 8 social service workers. for me, my passion has been the children. It's been protection of the babies, and public service provides a safety net so that children don't end up on the other side of the house with child protective services. My passion is in the protection of those babies, and social service workers provide the services. I recall a conversation from a wise board member who talked about compromise, and there seems to be a challenge in the communication and coming to a compromise or addressing some of these things in a group setting or specifically for Department of Human Services, but certainly we have asked for joint department head meetings, and that has not happened with our CAO. And an invitation again in December to meet came up to a couple days before, and our CAO canceled that. But we have similar concerns about the expertise that our staff, who are very hard to recruit, very hard to retain, and simply have a passion for our missions and decide to stay and learn all about us and our uniqueness. DHS, my department, runs on its own platform of Juniper. We are tied directly to the state in some of these consortiums. It's very complex, and these very valuable, incredible people have made a commitment to study, learn, and excel. And Kern County in Human Services has always been considered cutting edge. And while Mike Turnipseed says there's room for an improvement, and I believe that, I wouldn't tell you that we are based on old technology. We are based on web-based technology, and our county finally this year is converting to and moving to the C4 consortium group, CalASIS, or CalSAWS, that your board signed joint powers agreements for years ago. We've been in the process since 2001 in becoming a county who had multiple eligibility platforms to reducing down to one system that will cover all of California. And as of September of this year, I'm happy to say we're finally bringing that project home. But that is another massive outlay for the staff that supposedly will be going over as a dedicated staff with maybe some shared resources. And that is only one of 4 conversions that we're going through this year, so the timing couldn't be more difficult. I also want to address a statement that's been made about an HR staff member working in a similar capacity. And the HR person that belongs to Department of Human Services and is placed over at HR as a resource is actually, they do belong to Department of Human Services, not to HR. If there were a budget cut, we would make the choice of whether or not we could afford to keep them or not. We're involved in their EPR. For many years, up to a few years ago, they were not in a teaming session, and they ran through the claim. When we went to a team kind of an environment, I felt it was the best business decision to lay out all county general fund for them and keep them for advocating for us and working on recruitments in HR. But that's abating them from the claim. That's the guidance that I gave my fiscal staff, because I can't account for their time study in an environment where they're working not only on things for our department, back up to somebody else, coverage for vacations, when somebody drops out and leaves the county and you need a backup to fill for that, again, that becomes a shared resource, basically. So therein lies another one of the difficulties for me. I did want to share with you that in this phase 1 move of 6 staff, that is a little more than 25% of our staff, but in looking to meet the mission for our families, I would remind you that I am accountable for the services of Department of Human Services and for the $488 million budget and for the almost 2,000 staff. And I would share with you that these IT professionals and the closeness of the environment that we work in, that they were able to deploy 75% of our staff to work from home. We were the only county in the state of California who was able within 2 days to send all of their child welfare services staff home to work virtually. I feel compelled to make a statement about coordination and collaboration because there isn't a project that the county's been working on that we haven't collaborated with them, with our funding, and absorbed in this last year or ever, really, in my leadership as director. I have cooperated, I have collaborated, and we have been there from the count of people in January and lending our offices to be the headquarters for that, and a couple district offices to helping man the vote with more than 200 staff and managers who ran Delano and other regions for the voting, vaccines, temperature taking. It doesn't matter what this county embarks upon. We are a collaborative agency, and we work in tandem with the sales office, with HR, and I also want to return to organizationally the conversation about procurement of, I think Mac refers to it as economies of scale. We run our purchases through IT for approval and for coordination. We don't always get that same feedback in return. There are purchases made that cost us quite a bit of money. And I worry about the dollars, and I worry about the fact that it's 17-18, we were at a $1.3 million charge in IT, and we have blossomed to a $4.2 million charge in IT as of this year, current year. I did ask for a detail to those expenditures and charges, and to date have not ever received that, and that has been requested several times. From a taxpayer standpoint, I think that is very important to know what is happening with charges and why those dollar amounts are blossoming, and what the long-term impact is, because we don't have flexible dollars. And as Elsa had shared with me, you know, this could be cost neutral. This could be cost neutral if the staff were left on our payroll and they were 100% dedicated to human services. And then acknowledge that if there were costs above and beyond that yes, you would be looking at the potential of county dollars or realignment dollars, and that could impact program. And that's where I share with you about my social services, because where we have allocations and shared dollars in other areas in social services, that's county general fund and county realignment, and that represents about 70% of the cost of our social workers. So I would tell you that any one of the department heads that will be speaking with you, any one of them would do what they could to help the county family. And when Ryan asked me to, take a look at what this could mean for us, I said I was absolutely open to partnering wherever we potentially could. The financial situation would be a hurdle to get over, a challenge. I don't know that that's totally insurmountable. Feels a little bit that way right now in the current structure, but that we would do our very best to collaborate to do the best for the county family. But I would also have to look at the impacts to Department of Human Services. And I think that I'll leave it there and then be prepared to answer your questions now or after others speak at your leisure. But I remain committed to following through with whatever decision you make. I just want you to know about the unintended consequences, and I certainly would respectfully request that we slow this process because there isn't truly a transition plan. I don't think we even know all that this could mean. Refer us back to the CAO, revitalize the TAC, talk about the impacts to the county departments, and then come back forward to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murphy. Do any board members have any questions or comments right now? What was that? Okay. Okay. Who's our next speaker?
Chairman Peters, members of the board, John Lifquist, Kern County Assessor Recorder.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon. In July of 2019, the Assessor's Office voluntarily handed over control of its 4 IT staff members to County ITS with the agreement that our IT staff would be returned if we were dissatisfied. Though we were experiencing difficulties before that move, problems multiplied, services declined, and progress stalled after the move. Problems like our inability to get our newly completed oil and gas cash flow program installed for testing and implementation. New desktop computers sitting in boxes 6 and 7 months after purchase. By February 2020, before the COVID problem materialized, all management staff within the assessor's office agreed that we needed to take our IT staff back. The proposal before your board affects only network administrators and does not go as far as what the assessor agreed to at the start of fiscal 2019-2020. But I believe that the loss of access to the assessor's network administrator has caused the majority of my problems. Incidentally, my network administrator is central to deploying computers on the desktop. Of the 15 computers I purchased in January of 2019, as of last week, 3 are on desktops. Additionally, the one saving grace of this crisis was that the recorder retained control of all IT functions. I was able to reach out to my recorder network administrator to solve some of my problems, which now confounded County ITS. This proposal would take my recorder land administrator. Our recent experience after requesting and being denied the return of control of my own IT staff has been more positive, comparable to our experience before the assessor IT staff moved to County ITS 19 months ago. I believe this is because success with the assessor has now become a make or break demonstration of a long list of ITS assurances. Given the extent of outside help we've received in recent months, and incidentally, I love ITS staff. We appreciate all their help in our office. I lack confidence that this will continue once eyes are no longer on my office. I applaud the CAO's attempt to buttress County ITS and security. We're willing to follow any security protocols imposed or recommended by County ITS. The assessor's office was, I believe, the first county department to move our servers to the Panorama location when the new ITS building was completed. Our network administrator did not need to follow the servers to the new location to make that work. This proposal speaks of economies of scale. I'm not sure who benefited from these economies, but I don't believe it was the assessor. Best practices is defined as an industry-wide agreed upon standard, but not all counties agree that centralized IT is a best practice. Speaking for my own department, I reached out to a number of assessors that I work with on a regular basis and found none with centralized control of ITS on their staff. And I looked at this at about 1:30 and realized I should maybe give a list of the counties that I reached out to. On January 20th, I just spent about 10 minutes sending out emails to assessors that I work with regularly. Los Angeles, Orange, San Diego, Santa Clara, Alameda, Riverside, Sacramento, Ventura, Sonoma, San Joaquin, and San Francisco. One county, Sonoma, had network administrators with central IT. They controlled the rest of their IT staff. Alameda assessor had seven IT in his office and 18 on the county side where they were developing a new tax administrative system. Our ITS has no plans to develop our own tax administrative system. My quick informal survey showed that the best practices hardly has universal acceptance, and those the two I mentioned were the only counties that did not have full control over their IT department. According to Riverside Assessor Clerk Recorder, we considered opting in, but we asked pointed questions to County IT about service level agreements and cost-saving measures, as well as long-term plans for innovation. Both parties agreed that it probably wasn't a good idea for them to try and take us on. Peter Aldana from Riverside County currently has an IT staff of 26 members for his 3 departments. Los Angeles County Assessor Jeff Prang said, centralized IT services tend to be significantly more expensive than can be secured independently, and everything takes forever to get. For instance, we engaged Oracle to rebuild our new tech platform. In considering where to host the system long-term, our county ISD quoted us about $4 to $5 million annually. Oracle can do it for $1 million. We had to fight to be released from the county mandate. Los Angeles County Assessor has an IT staff of 100. According to Greg Ginsberg, Assistant Assessor at Santa Clara County, and whatever you think of Silicon Valley, it's hard to argue that Silicon Valley isn't the technological leader. Santa Clara says, we have our own IT division and guard it against county efforts to take it over. The benefits are enormous for helping our office remain nimble and responsive. In the 1990s, at the time that desktop computers were originally supplied to the entire assessor staff, the assessor's office had 126 employees on its payroll. Through obvious efficiencies and improvement in our process by innovation, in-house innovation and off-the-shelf programs, the assessor was able to accomplish with a staff averaging 86 in 2019, far more work than could have been imagined in the 1990s. And that 86, I include the 4 IT staff that I no longer have. So that's a 35% reduction in staff due to the fact that we have been able to make progress with IT. Anticipating the inevitable decline in oil prices, oil reserves, and its effect on assessment roll and county revenue, the assessor is committed to innovation as a way to accomplish our yearly tasks with an ever-diminishing budget. I believe that ceding control over department IT, my attempt to increase efficiencies, was a disastrous move in the wrong direction. I agree with these other department heads that this proposal would be a mistake for Kern County.
Thank you, Mr. Lifquist. And who's the next speaker? Good afternoon, Ms. Bedard.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Nearly 2 years ago, the County Administrative Office moved my IT staff from being part of the Auditor Controller's Office to ITS. The Auditor Controller IT staff served not just Auditor Controller, County Clerk, and Elections, but also handled applications used by all county employees through AuditorNet, including the TRACS timekeeping system, employee travel reimbursements, and vendor payments, areas for which I am responsible. I would like to tell you about my experience since the staff has moved to ITS. The move included my programming staff of 5 programmers, as well as my technology staff, which consisted of 3 employees, a technology services manager who oversaw the entire technology support for Auditor Controller, County Clerk, Elections, and the AuditorNet system, a LAN administrator who handled not just our network issues, but other technology issues as well, and a technical support engineer. The Technology Services Manager is now assigned to oversee the entire countywide operations team of ITS, as well as overseeing the needs of my office. The LAN Administrator is full-time on the countywide network team at ITS, and the only employee dedicated full-time to my office is the one technical support engineer. Over the past 2 years, we have often asked for additional staff to assist the technical support engineer. ITS occasionally sent someone to our office for a few hours to help, but then they were gone again. The Technology Services Manager does try to provide as much support as he possibly can, but they have essentially put him in an impossible situation. They have given him 2 full-time jobs overseeing countywide operations, as well as continuing to oversee operations in my office. But he is only one person. Essentially, they have used my staff to plug holes in their staffing needs, rather than making the necessary investments in countywide IT staffing. The one exception to this was a few weeks before the November election, when ITS did assign additional staff to assist elections. However, that is the only time I've been able to get support comparable to what I had when the IT staff was in my office. In addition, costs have gone up dramatically since the move to ITS, so we now have less service and at a higher cost. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Bedard. Next speaker, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Cindy Zimmer, Kern County's District Attorney. About a year ago, our IT staff merged with that of the county IT. And I have to say my experiences have been different than those of my colleagues. It has been a very favorable experience. Over the last several years, we have really struggled with technology. Our criminal division is operating on a case management system called CJIS, C-J-I-S, and it's been a struggle. It's been a struggle to be able to limp along using that system, and we've even had to have attorneys write software to keep us going for that system, so it's been very difficult. We also have faced a lot of struggles because over at our crime lab, each of those instruments operates on proprietarial software. So our county, our DA IT staff had to know a lot of different things about CJIS and about the crime lab. About the time that we chose to merge, we had some personnel issues. We had our program administrator of 30 years chose to suddenly retire. He had an illness in his family. We had another long-term employee retire. It was coincidental, but in a good way, because county IT stepped in to help us. We would not have been able to hire from the outside to get quality people that we needed to be able to understand and learn what we were having to do with CJIS and what we were having to do at the crime lab. And Mac Avancina and his group, who I have found to be extremely helpful, very knowledgeable, and very quick to help us, really did jump to the task. The other day I had to do a Teams meeting, and I didn't know how to do that, and for 250 people. And Pearson Jew came over and walked me through it. And it was very helpful. That was my state of the office address that we had to do for 250 employees because we couldn't come in here. So I was able to do that by Teams. We also have two remaining people that were part of our office and that did not, that of course we merged, but there were still two employees and they got to remain behind. And they've been very helpful with us and they are physically on our property. COVID presented quite a bit of technological challenges for us. And if it weren't for county IT, we would have had a lot of problems. They were able to set us up with remote testimony. So instead of having our witnesses go to court, we've been able to testify remotely. That was something new. And there have been a lot of other challenges. We are still limping along with CJIS. We really hope that we're able to get, and county IT is hopefully going to help us with this, a new case management system. But in the meantime, we are straddled with body cam video, trying to deal with that. Proprietarial video from people's homes, cell phone video. These are all digital pieces of evidence that we have to get from police, put in a form, and take it to court. And in addition, we have to transcribe all the body cam videos. We have 25 officers in one incident. So it's overwhelming for us. And this all involves help from county IT. And they are helping us move forward where I just don't know if what we had before would have been able to do that. So I can tell you that my experience has been different. It's been favorable. I understand that I have different needs than my colleagues of other department heads, but I did want to share with you my experience. It's not perfect, We're working on some of those things. I have computers that need to be installed as well, but I understand that county IT has been doing a lot of things, like out at the fairground, and they're having to do a lot of things because of COVID too. So we are anxiously waiting for our new computers, but overall, it's been a very good experience. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Zimmer. Could we get our next speaker, please?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Jordan Kaufman, Kern County Treasurer and Tax Collector. I am here to speak in opposition of the IT realignment proposal. So I appreciate your indulgence and time in that. Before I talk about my concerns, I do want to say that I have the highest respect for our CAO, Ryan Alsop. Has a super tough job and does overall a very good job. I have some fundamental disagreements with this particular proposal. I also hold IT in high regard. Mac and his leadership team, that some of them are here, I've worked with many of them over the years and have a lot of respect for them. All that being said, now I can rip into them. No, I'm just kidding. All that being said, you know, I also think we have the same goals, okay? We all want to improve efficiency, both on a countywide perspective, but also from a department perspective, and both of those are very important. We want to continue to, you know, increase security of our systems, and that is hugely important, and, you know, we have those same goals. Standardization is also important, and of course, efficiency. However, I think though all of those goals are being accomplished and can continue to be accomplished without actually transferring resources from departments to ITS. And essentially that's what this is. This is a shift of resources. ITS maybe is under-resourced and they need more resources. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But in shifting these resources, it really is going to leave a resource gap in the affected departments. And when I talk about a resource gap, that translates directly to the level of service that we as departments provide directly to the constituents of Kern County. You know, county constituents, they sort of interact and touch the county typically at the department level, not at the sort of central IT level. And so having the necessary resources at the department level to be innovative and continue to improve services to the public, that's important. Obviously, as an elected official, I have to answer directly to the public, so that's extremely important. So I want to talk about best practices that has been talked about by some of the other department heads up here, and some of the other things I'm going to talk about may be a little bit redundant, but you know, I feel it's important to make sure that these points are made. With regard to best practices, I actually also did a survey of my counterparts of treasurer tax collectors up and down the state and found that many larger, medium and larger size counties do have their own IT staff. You can statistically make the argument that most counties don't have, most counties have centralized IT. But most counties are very small and departments aren't big enough to have their own. But many medium and larger size counties, and we are considered sort of right in between a medium and a large size county, absolutely the departments have their own IT staff, and that is absolutely necessary for their operations. So the current structure of that is sort of the hub and spoke structure, right? In the report, in the board letter, it talks about kind of wing-to-wing consolidation. The hub and spoke structure is actually best practice. And that is sort of the current situation, the current structure where IT is in charge of all of the backbone infrastructure and central systems that touch either the county overall or multiple departments. And then larger county departments have their own IT staff. And that structure works very well. I think moving resources is actually going to stifle innovation at the department level. My department specifically we have had a reduction in employees over the years. I have 30 employees right now. If you go back far enough, it was 60, it was 70. We have continued to be able to automate and innovate to absorb budget cuts after budget cuts over the years and reduce staffing, but only because we have the necessary resources in our department to innovate. So obviously I have kind of a fundamental difference in what is best for the county in regard to this proposal, but I also want to talk about the structure of the proposal. And this was mentioned before, that the board letter and our communications, some of our communications with the CAO's office and ITS have talked about that these network positions will be 100% dedicated to our department. And then we've also had communications and discussions, and some of them recent, that these will absolutely be shared resources. And so with a network position, and I have one, I'm fighting for one position, but it is a critical position in my department. That position that obviously currently resides in my department, under this proposal, they would be relocated to ITS, to central ITS up on the Hill. They would be managed and administered by central IT. I would have, and my staff would have, no access to that position. I asked the question, and it was the answer was, if this position is still 100% dedicated to me, do I still have to go through the help desk? And the answer was simply yes. So I will have no access to this person. To me, if the position is 100% dedicated to my department, and now all of a sudden they're not here, I don't have access, I have to do a help desk, how is that more efficient? I can't get my arms around that. Now, the flip side of that is this really going to become a shared resource? And by shared resource, the way it's been explained is that you'd have all the network positions in central ITS, and they would all be available to all departments. So you call in a help desk, and you put in your request, and whoever is available that day or whatever is going to respond. That's the sort of the shared resource thing. So I'm still not confident, because we've gotten sort of conflicting information about whether this is in fact 100% dedicated to our department, in which case I don't really see the point, or it is a shared resource. And if it's a shared resource, then we really need to look at the structure of keeping those positions in our department budgets so that we have to pay for them 100%. To me, that also doesn't make sense, if that is in fact the case. For my department, I just feel like that is sort of inappropriate to be paying 100% for a shared resource. However, for other departments, such as DHS, that can actually kind of violate federal charging rules, and they'd have to exclude costs, and that would be a major impact. So that is still a big question I think needs to be resolved, I guess. Another issue is related to the service level agreements. We had a lot of discussion back and forth on the service level agreements, and they were were good on one hand that they sort of identified what the levels of service were, but where they fell short is there is absolutely no accountability in those service level agreements if the service level doesn't meet the required metrics that are in that agreement. And, we pushed back and wanted to add kind of accountability measures, but essentially were denied. So it's, service level agreement's good, but if it has no teeth or no accountability, then it really isn't an agreement. And I would argue if ITS is going to operate like a business, typically a business is going to be accountable for the service level that they provide. Let's see. Wanted to address, in the board letter, it talked about, that these network activities are sort of wall jack back, that everything from the wall jack back is sort of, not standardized, but I don't even have the right term, but I feel like that is sort of an oversimplification of what the network systems are in different departments. My department, and I'm not a large department personnel-wise, but I'm a fairly sophisticated department technology-wise, because my office relies so heavily on automation to get our jobs done. So we have 15 physical servers. We have 33 virtual servers that are sort of partitioned between those 15 servers. We have 8 network switches and a network router. And all of those require day-to-day administration, maintenance, and of course, if something goes wrong, it has to be fixed immediately. And obviously, having the staff to do that in my department is critical. And it just seems like a less efficient model if I have no access to this person and I have to put in a help desk request and hope for the best. Let's see. A couple of other points that I want to make that are not actually major points. They're sort of minor, but when I read the board letter, I was a little frustrated at some of it, so I felt like I wanted to address them. So one is the reference to the 2016 report. It says that this proposal was recommended by a third-party IT assessment that was presented in 2016 to your board. I was part of the Technology Advisory Committee that report was generated out of. I was part of the review process. That's really not what that report said. So I want to read you a snippet of that report from the executive summary that sort of addresses this issue. It says, most departments are reporting a significant backlog of end-user requests for service. This backlog should be quantified. An evaluation should occur to see if there are potential efficiencies to be gained by approaching the backlog in a different manner, such as moving, and that's this proposal, or simply adding positions to ITS. And it goes on further to say that for this evaluation, HR should be included in the discussion with the Technology Advisory Committee. So a couple of points there. One is there was a major backlog of end-user requests. And, historically, Central ITS has been very good at their core mission, maintaining countywide infrastructure and countywide systems. However, also historically, and this report it was black and white in the report, historically, Central IT has not been the best at providing services to county departments. And you've heard some good and some bad here today, so there's still mixed results on that regard. The other point I wanted to make was the Technology Advisory Committee. It was in that report, it was absolutely adamant that any evaluation or proposal like this should go through the Technology Advisory Committee. That was the whole purpose of that committee. And for the past probably year or two, I've had a couple of conversations with Mac about, let's get the TAC back together. And that has not happened, obviously. I think the last time it met was 2017 or 2018. It might have even been before Mac was here. So it's not like Mac shut it down or anything. It wasn't meeting before then as well. The last times were in 2016. So, and the Technology Advisory Committee was mentioned, I don't know, probably 30 times in that report about how important it is, because you need to get stakeholders together on a proposal like this to make sure that, there aren't any unintended consequences, and it truly does reflect what is best for the county overall. The other sort of thing that again is not like a critical piece, but when I read it, I was a little frustrated, so I wanted to address it, and that was the mention of Lean Six Sigma. The board letter did say, continuing in the best practice of Lean Six Sigma, and it went on to talk about the efficiencies that can be gained from this proposal. So I specifically asked early on in the process, can this proposal go through the formal, Lean Six Sigma process, which of course would involve getting stakeholders together and going through the Lean Six Sigma process. The written response that I received from the CAO's office it said, reviewing the countywide goals and objectives for this realignment effort, you will find that many of them do not include quantifiable and measurable variables and do not lend themselves well to a Lean Six Sigma process. So I was told, no, not Lean Six Sigma, but the board letter for your board was told, yes, this was Lean Six Sigma. So again, not a big deal, but it was frustrating. Where do we go from here? So obviously I am requesting that your board not approve this item. And I do believe that the current structure of hub and spoke is the best practice, not wing to wing. However, if your board is still, wants to explore this going forward, I would request that at least it be referred back to the CAO and the affected department heads all together so that we could try and really collaboratively try and come up with some solutions. Because again, I think we have the same goals. We absolutely have the same goals. And that could potentially go through the TAC, the Technology Advisory Committee, or a Lean Six Sigma process, but I think it's still worthy of trying to come up with a solution that everyone agrees upon. That concludes my remarks. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. Our next speaker, please.
The good news is I think I'm the last one here, so. T.R. Miracle, Chief Probation Officer. I think it's been said, but I think all sides clearly want what's best, and I'm of the belief that reasonable people can disagree, and that when we do disagree, we have to try to figure out, well, what's the best way forward. And while I happen to disagree with Mr. Alsop on this matter, it doesn't mean I don't support him. I have and will continue to work well with him, and I appreciate his efforts in the many challenges that face Kern County. However, ultimately, as chief, I feel like I have the obligation to talk about what I think is in the best interest of my department, my staff, and the people we serve. During the time that this has been proposed, I've had the opportunity to discuss this with all the supervisors, and I appreciate you all taking the time to meet with me. I won't reiterate all the reasons that I previously brought up. I just want to highlight just a few. So first, I just want to talk about how my IT staff is an integral and integrated part of my department. They're not just a service, but they're a huge part of my vision and mission. I think it's critical as a leader of a public safety department to have direct input and direction. I also think it's important to consider labor's perspective in this. I certainly won't speak for them, but if they've given you their position, I think it's important to consider that. I can talk about my own personal IT staff in that They are not in favor of this. Next, I just want to talk about efficiency. My department, over time and with different fiscal constraints, has evolved the appropriate level of IT services to meet its needs. Adding an additional layer of bureaucracy will make it less efficient, not more. I think it'll slow down decisions and processes. I surveyed different probation departments throughout the state, and I asked about how their IT was configured and their satisfaction with how it was configured. If you take out the small counties, it's about a 50-50% split between the chief having direct control of his IT staff or not having direct control. Moreover, the satisfaction rate was 30 points higher for those with direct control. It's the difference between 60 and 90%. Some of these counties where the probation department had direct control of their ITs include Santa Clara, San Francisco, Fresno, Santa Barbara, and San Bernardino. Next, I'd like to talk about security. Security is of the utmost importance to me and my department, and I know of the county as well. And we want that security at the county level, and also I have the additional requirements of security because of Department of Justice. My department has CORI information, criminal offender record information. I'm periodically audited by the Department of Justice to make sure that our security is up to snuff. We have and will continue to collaborate with any standards, guidelines, or policies enacted at the county level regarding security. We've gone through security audits, my department, with no reportable actions. I've talked to numerous IT experts and staff who said that they believe that you can accomplish security without consolidation as long as you have the appropriate level of collaboration. In conclusion, I sincerely believe, based on my experience and knowledge, that this is the not best way forward to achieve security and efficiency. I believe through collaboration and partnership, such as the TAC, we can align our vision and direction, that we can accomplish security, and we can provide for economies of scales on purchases. I think we can do all of this without having to sacrifice the many concerns that were presented here today. I've been chief for just over 6 years, and I'm very thankful for the support I've gotten from the Board of Supervisors and the CAO's office. I don't take lightly a public display of disagreement, and I've never done this before, and because of that, I hope that you consider the sincere concerns that I have and that have been presented today. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Miracle. Before we come back to the board, is there anybody else? Mr. Brown?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I want to offer my comments too, as a small department who's a little less fortunate, doesn't have their own IT staff. Just the response that we've gotten from Mr. Avancina's office since we've had some of these consolidation efforts over the last couple of years under his leadership. Mr. Avancina came in about 2.5 years ago, took over the IT department. Prior to that, our service level was not very good from the IT department. And we were, one of those departments that doesn't have their own IT staff to rely on. So we were relying on ITS to provide our services. That has changed dramatically, and I want to share a story about how that's happened during COVID-19. This March, when we were all faced with the decision of how to move our staff off of our work sites to respond to the governor's stay-at-home order and keep operations, our department worked hand in hand with their department to ensure that we had the equipment, the capabilities, and the technology to make sure that our staff could provide those services while working remotely. Without that, we would have had to have many more staff on site, staff who have children at home like myself, and aren't able to be in the work site because of that. His efforts and his team's efforts allowed us to equip ourselves and be ready to meet this moment during this pandemic. And without that effort, we wouldn't have been as successful as we were. Another story I want to talk about related to security is we're all one county. I experienced that myself personally, being phished by an email. And if you can imagine the human resources director or chief human resources officer being part of a phishing scam, I'm going to touch everybody in the county because they get emails from me all over the place. So whether it's the probation department, the treasurer, tax collector, DHS, I'm emailing all those people. So when something like that happens, it affects everybody in the county. And it's important to have one standard bearer to provide leadership and respond to those security and infrastructure situations. We had a situation, not with us in particular, but with one of our vendors in our healthcare setting. And I know that Mac and his team have the leadership and capabilities to address these head on because they stepped in and helped that vendor with their ransomware attack, even though it wasn't them in particular. They advised them, walked them through the process. They immediately shut down all the transmissions from the county to that vendor and made sure that we were safe and protected and that our members' health information was protected. And so without that leadership of his team, who knows what would have happened, and that vendor surely would have struggled to make sure that they're meeting their obligations as a third-party administrator of our county. So a lot of things have been said today. I want to offer my experience with his leadership, and that's really what it comes down to for me when it comes to this proposal is who's the person going to be in charge of this operation, and his team has really responded under him over the past 2.5 years, and I think that they've helped move our IT department forward leaps and bounds, and I think that this will be a successful effort. I know there's some concerns that department heads have, and I understand those because it's the unknown, but I think after all is said and done, as you listen to Mr. Nance's comments on the call, the end result is something much more positive for our organization. So I hope that you consider my comments. I wasn't going to speak today, but I felt compelled to sitting here, so I just wanted to offer my support for this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Supervisor Couch, okay, perfect. Okay, Mr. Alsop, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, would you consider providing us an opportunity to respond to some of the comments that were made?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to reiterate, I'm going to hand it over to Mac and Jim on a lot of this. I just want to reiterate that this is what this proposal is. This proposal is a change in governance structure for 13 currently filled positions. They are network and systems positions. It's not a change in function. These positions are fully dedicated 100% to serving the departments that they're currently serving. I have made that clear in person, looking people in the eye, on phone, and in communication via email. And I will reiterate that to you today. This is, again, limited in scope with regard to IT. Several of these departments retain customer-facing IT staff to support them. These are certain, again, as Jordan said, Mr. Kaufman said, wall-jack-back positions. Ms. Bedard is not impacted by this change. This change changes nothing in her office. I would say that if Ms. Bedard is having issues with IT service, this is the first I know about it.
Me, and in my position, the most important is the time it takes to execute response and remediation. Without central control over all these decisions, then we will find ourselves losing valuable time communicating and implementing required changes during an actual incident. If you look at how our Emergency Operations Center is designed, the EOC is responsible for the strategic direction and operational decisions. It collects, gathers, analyzes data. But more importantly, it has the proper authority to carry out actions that are necessary to respond to a disaster. Who has the proper authority today to carry out actions that are necessary to an IT disaster? I would position that it's my office. I would position it's Ryan Alsop's office. But how am I going to be able to respond? How am I going to be able to collect, gather, and analyze information if I don't have line of sight into those systems that are being supported. There was a lot of discussions around tech. And for those of you that may not be familiar, that was the Technology Advisory Committee. When I came on board the summer of 2018, I reached out directly to the IT managers and the leaders of each individual department. And my goal then, as it still is today, is to use that audience to meet monthly to talk through IT investments, to talk through IT strategy, and to talk to IT shared goals. I think it's important that we have these conversations at a technology level, not a departmental level. And the reason why is because the pulse of our business is measured by what those folks are seeing at the ground floor and not necessarily what we're having to make decisions on at the executive level. So if I understand properly and they felt that TAC was valuable, then my ask is, how is TAC valuable in defining security policy for the County of Kern? How is TAC valuable in being able to optimize and make efficient investments for the County of Kern? Why is it that through your board, we've been able to unify our productivity applications to communications with Office 365, saving us $600,000 over 3 years? Through your board, we've been able to manage back-end and operational server and storage through our partnership with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, reducing a 42% decrease in cost. With your board, we've been able to approve security application efforts, centralizing all of our tools under one manufacturer. The reality is that there's multiple ways to skin a cat. And with respect to service level agreements, and I'd like to give Mr. Lindquist and Ms. Bedard and address some of their concerns. With the assessor's office, in the year and a half that we've supported the assessors, we've fielded 588 service requests. To date, we've closed 570, 97%. Of those 97% of service requests, 31% of those were actually solved by my ITS staff, not Mr. Lindquist's staff. And I think that's really important to illustrate here today because that shows that there's more demand than supply of resources. And this is where economies of scale, this is where centralization, this is where optimization of resources really matter, right? And then the other piece I'd like to talk about with Ms. Bedard is that, with the auditor's office, there were 640 service requests that we fielded. We've closed 619 of them, 96% complete. 77% of those tickets were solved by my ITS resources. Not her former dedicated team, but my ITS resources. So again, I have to challenge the thought process around how we've been able to do it before is consistent with what we're trying to accomplish as a county when it comes to optimization, efficiency, and scale. And the last thing I'd like to conclude with is this. If we're not measuring our services today, then how do we know we're improving? I can tell you that we are measuring our services today across ITS. I can't tell you how the individual departments are measuring their services today. So if their position is that, we don't think we're going to be able to achieve the same amount of service, then my position is really clear. The resources that are performing your services today are the same resources that will perform your services tomorrow. And if they are not performing your services to the way that you'd like for them to perform, then we'll have the data to support it. And then we'll have those conversations. And then we'll be able to use Lean Six Sigma. We'll be able to do continual service improvements. We'll be able to do quarterly business reviews. We'll be able to have very impactful and very measurable conversations with the business with how we provide services to our teams. Oh, Mr. Zervis was asking about the hub and scope comments. I think that's a misrepresentation. A hub and spoke requires and illustrates that there's a connection between the hub and the scope. We're multiple hubs. Let's make no mistake about it. ITS oversees the overall infrastructure apparatus of the county, back-end WAN, which is a wide area network, our internet access, our plumbing, if you will. But at the end of the day, I don't have line of sight into their inventory. I don't have line of sight into what risks are being presented now with those assets, with where they are with their service life cycle. I don't believe that that's a hub and spoke model. I believe that's a multiple hub model. And that's where, as Mr. Alsop has indicated, governance, insight, control, compliance. Those are all critical levers in how we manage a $3 billion organization servicing 900,000 constituents that employs 8,500 people.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Avancina. Elsa? Oh, excuse me, Ms. Martinez?
You can call me Elsa. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I just want to clarify something that Ms. Murphy said about the claim. We spend, and believe me, I know nothing about IT, but thanks to Mrs. Murphy, we were able to train our staff on the claim process, which is the mechanism that they use to draw down dollars. And it's a very complex process, and we didn't want to guess what any realignment of this dedicated staff will have in DHS. So we asked Ms. Murphy's staff and Mrs. Murphy as well to do what we call a mock claim. What is this going to look like if we do the changes? We asked them to do this before the October, and the impact they gave us was less than $200,000 overall, okay? Then we came back to them and asked them, okay, so we were told the scope changed, this is the final scope, what's the fiscal impact? To this day, today is the first time I heard that is $900,000, and because there's gonna be, they're gonna have to pull those resources. And I wanna make sure this is clear. The realignment of the preparing the claim is not under consideration. The DHS employees will continue to stay on the payroll, will continue to report their time under the guidelines of the Department of Human Services. Their fiscal staff is still responsible for reviewing, preparing that claim. That is not changing. And our expectations is that that claim is still gonna comply with any federal, state, and our own auditor controller that reviews that claim. That hasn't changed. So I wanna make sure that's clear to your board, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Is there, okay, that's it. I'll bring it back to the board now for comments. Supervisor Couch, would you like to go ahead?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Well, I'm sorry you all had to go through that, but I appreciate your sincerity and your, all of you, your sincerity and your comments. I remember in 1998 when I was running for office, I sat and watched a debate for another office holder, and I heard someone answer a question, process, process, process. And that kind of always stuck with me. And I like what Ms. Murphy had to say, and what, I forgot, was it Jordan? Mr. Kaufman had to say, or one of the other speakers mentioned there was an agreement somewhere along the line in the past that something like this would go through the TAC and be worked out there and be brought back. And I think that should have happened here. And I'm not an IT expert, Mr. Avancina, you are. But I've been around long enough to know that the processes are in place for a reason. And unfortunately, this has come to us. So, and I'm going to tell you, I'm not in support of it, even though it might be a good idea, which I can't measure. But I'll tell you why I can't measure it. I have been told directly that we have been told directly that this probably isn't going to save any money. In fact, it might cost more money, but it's a security issue. We've also been told, oh, it's a cost savings measure. In fact, that's in the board letter today. I've been told, we've been told every county as big as Kern County or larger has already done this. We are behind the times. Today we hear, and I've heard in the past from our department heads, but I didn't want to have this discussion. That's not true. Lots of departments in the larger, and I hate to use this word, but it was used, to progressive counties, do things in a similar fashion the way we're doing them. I like what our chairman once said was, just because the rest of California is doing something, does that mean we have to do it? I don't like anything else they do. I also think, and I agree with, and I don't know who said it, I think it was Mr. Kaufman, maybe others said it. Well, let me back up and say, I met a young man out one night by sheer luck, who was a county employee. And I asked him, how's the IT thing going in your department? And he said, well, it's, you know, they all went up to the hill, and we've all come back, or all but one have come back. And if I want a job done, though, I have to put in a ticket that on the other side of town, and they have to tell, you know, the IT tech in my office, in the office there, what to do. And I used to see him in the break room, or walk down to his office, or pick up the phone, or whatever, stop in his office door as I was walking down the hallway, and just say, hey, I need you to do this, then this. That's not, if you put that through the Lean Six Sigma process, I promise you're not going to come out with what we saw here, what the recommendation is. And that's what I think Mr. Kaufman is talking about when you're talking about the Lean Six Sigma process. It's the initiation of the request and how that's handled. Mr. Zervis, I don't want to pick on you, but I'm going to ask you a question. You said there'll be no material financial impact. Every one of these people, employees, or people that we're talking about, will walk me through that. Are they going to remain on the budget of, let's take DHS for a second. Are they going to remain DHS employees, or are they ITS employees?
Supervisor Couch to the chair, they would remain on the budget of the department they're currently on. So they would remain on DHS's budget, they would remain on TTC's budget.
But if Ms. Murphy wants to have them do some work, does she have to contact somebody in IT, or does she go to that employee that she used to just call or contact directly? How does that work?
So I'm going to defer to Mr. Evansina as far as the process for, you know, how requests would be fulfilled.
Got it.
Supervisor Couch to the chair. When I think about how do you engage your resources, it's quite simple to me. These are wall jack back resources.
Well, here's my question. She wants something done by her dedicated IT staff. How does she request that?
They request it for wall jack back resources. We use the same accounting and system of records system today, which is our help desk. That's how they go about it.
So she doesn't, the change will be, she won't go to her employee and say, hey, can you go do fill in the blank? She'll call your help desk and ask them to assign someone, typically, hopefully, her dedicated employee to do fill in the blank.
They will be her dedicated employee, and ideally, I'd like to do that because there has to be a chain of custody with how we measure and manage operations. That's number one. Number two is that even if she elects not to contact the help desk, I would ask that these resources still put a claim in the system so that there is record and evidence of that task, of that work being performed.
Okay, so I don't know who this question is for. It's either Elsa or Jim, I think. There will be, when you say no material impact, the way you just described it, there should be absolutely, in my feeble little mind, zero impact. Not even, when you say no material, I think, well, there might be a little more cost, but it's not material in someone's mind. But to me, there's no cost difference if it's remaining on someone's budget. Is that accurate?
It is. The only potential cost that we've identified is where an employee is currently performing duties out of classification, and that those functions don't move over to ITS. So if they're doing something totally unrelated to their current job specification, then that task may have to be picked up by somebody else. And so there is a cost associated with that, and that's what I mean by...
I'm trying to understand.
Okay.
Ms. Murphy's fictitious employee is dedicated 100% to her, but that employee might do something in another department?
No, so Ms. Murphy's land classification employee, maybe that person is you know, responsible for buying office paper.
Did I pick the wrong department?
No,
Because-
it doesn't, no, I think I think I'm trying to explain it. So if that person, what's being transferred over are those core land functionalities, and that's why that person doesn't need to be at that location. And so where there's a potential cost is if that employee is working out of classification and those duties don't transfer with this role, then there might be some shifting of responsibilities there, and there might be some costs associated with that. So I don't want to tell you.
I'm not trying to be difficult, but if they're still on her budget, how is there a different role for that employee?
Well, they're physically moving in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, that employee's physically moving up to the hill, up to the ITS location.
But they're still in her budget?
Correct.
Still under the same classification of job?
Correct. But if that employee prior to the move was doing something on site that may have had a different, outside of the scope of that land classification, and was performing a function on site, and that employee's not physically there to
So
perform
they
that
can't
function.
perform that, so somebody else would have to do it?
So someone, and that's would be, there's potentially a cost
On-site.
impact there, correct?
In her building?
Yes.
That's where the,
That's why I didn't say no, I said no
Gotcha.
material. That's correct. It's hard to quantify that.
I understand. I would be, well, I support this going through the process that has been established. And I think it's unfortunate that it's come back this way, and I think the only way to avoid coming back this way is going through that process. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Couch. Are there any other board member comments on this? Supervisor Scrivener?
I wasn't sure which one of us were going to go, but I think I'll go ahead. I don't have a whole lot to say on this, except for this. I heard one of the speakers today talk about the need for compromise. The CAO's office has already dialed this back 90%. And so now we're talking about a remaining 10% of what was originally proposed, yet there's calls for compromise and sending it to a committee, et cetera. And with all due respect to the speakers, I understand that you have concerns, and I think your concerns are legitimate, but I don't see us getting anywhere by sending this to a committee and taking more time when the CAO's already moved 90% and we're talking about the last 10. I see folks that just are opposed to this, and I don't see anything changing, frankly and respectfully. And so I have confidence in Mac and Mr. Avancina. I have confidence in Mr. Alsop and Mr. Zervis. I think that this is the responsibility ultimately of the CAO's office. The accountability for security and efficacy of our IT is ultimately going to fall on them. If there is a security breach in one of our departments, no one is going to be pointing fingers at that department head. It's going to be pointing fingers at Mr. Avancina and his staff and our CAO. And so for that reason, I think that it is in our board's best interest to support this change moving forward. I think that we can consider doing more down the line, but at this point, we're talking about, I think, a very modest change that I think is going to give the county more confidence in our security, and I believe that Mr. Avancina, his words about having something that's measurable, where his accountability, et cetera, is important for us moving forward. And so I'm going to support the CAO's recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Supervisor Scrivener. Supervisor Maggard, did you have anything you wanted to share?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Avancina, I have a question for you that's fundamental to my position on this issue. In the board letter that we received, in the third paragraph, it says, I'm going to paraphrase, the goal of this request is to centralize all wall-jack back office functions spanning security, that goes through several iterations of that, and enables infrastructure operations to provide wing-to-wing accountability. Put that in layman's terms that the public and I can understand. that explain why, what will be different about how we secure our IT services after today's decision as opposed to how we did it yesterday before that decision.
Supervisor Maggard, through the chair, the buck stops with me. We come across a scenario where we've been compromised. It doesn't matter what department's been compromised, the Kern County has been compromised, and the buck stops with me. As your Chief Information Technology Officer, that is my ultimate responsibility. My ultimate responsibility is to be accountable to the needs and the concerns of our IT infrastructure and our IT services and delivery for Kern County, which includes 40 departments in this case. And currently today, Supervisor Maggard, that's not happening. The responsibility, I would argue, still would be mine, but if I don't have the governance and the oversight into how those assets are being measured, how those assets are being managed, I think that really puts all of us in a compromised state.
Okay, thank you. I respect every person who spoke today. And yes, I agree with what one of the speakers said, that reasonable people can disagree. And I acknowledge and note the concerns that have been expressed. But the essential issue to me is how we secure our system. We have more than 8,000 employees. We have thousands of computers, many of which today are laptops sitting on someone's couch, sitting in someone's spare bedroom, sitting on the end table, opening emails that are in our system and not in our system. We are absolutely vulnerable to an attack. And Baltimore, for example, you cited to us, spent $18 million because they refused to pay the ransom. I know from my business life that this issue is an unspoken of but raging fire across many, many, many industries, because ransomware and other invasions where people get into a system and take money and move it around, we are very, very vulnerable. So if we do not take all the steps necessary to assure that that security is established and in place, and we have a breach, that responsibility falls to Mr. Avanzina, Mr. Alsop, and us. It also affects those departments, some of which are elected, some of which are not. But we have the responsibility to make this decision to assure that all the steps necessary to make sure that security is in place. And as I said, I respect all those who spoke. I have duly noted what their concerns are, but I think that is the most compelling reason for us to proceed with today's recommendation.
Thank you, Supervisor Maggard. Supervisor Perez, did you have any comments you wanted to share?
Can you hear me, Peter?
Yes, we got you.
Okay, you can hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you fine.
Okay, thank you. Well, it's an incredibly complicated position to be in because we've attempted to resolve this informally many times, and I can't begin to express my disappointment and heartache over where we find ourselves at this place. So I'm not going to belabor the points. I think the presentations today were all excellent from people that I know very well, to love their departments, to love this county, and I think it's unfortunate the position we find ourselves in. But I do believe that the arguments as laid out by Supervisor Scribner and Maggard are sound, and I'm ready to proceed with staff's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Perez. Just a few thoughts I had wanted to share and a couple questions. Mr. Alsop, is it, I thought we heard that the Sheriff's Department and Child Support Services aren't being included in this. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman.
Is there a particular reason why they're not being included?
There is. I'll attempt, and whatever I don't get make clear, I'm going to have Mac or Jim. But Child Support Services is completely sort of directed and funded. Their whole apparatus is state-driven. There are rules, requirements, and it's just not an environment that we are able to successfully manage and not allowed to. The sheriff, which is consistent with really sheriff's departments all over the state, they all operate uniquely based on sensitive information that people outside sworn law enforcement positions and others are not able to see or have any exposure to. And if I'm missing anything, please, Mr. Zervis or Mac, fill in.
Chairman Peters, with respect to, Mr. Alsop is correct, with respect to child support services, that's actually effectively a California State Department. So all of their email systems, those are all being managed by the state of California and not Kern County. So it's not a good fit because they actually are provided support by the state. With respect to the sheriff's departments across the California County, it's precedent. The sheriff's department has always been independent of any type of shared kind of activity. But that being said, we work hand in hand with the sheriff's team, and they follow our processes when it comes to standards and security. So while it's not a full integration in that regard, we still work with them hand in hand to make sure that we have full coverage and accountability across the county.
Okay, and then my other question is, it seems like one of the overarching concerns is losing control or losing some of the oversight of some of the IT staff. And it seems like our concern is accountability and transparency in what's going on in IT and making sure we have security in place. So is there a reason that it's better that we're shifting resources from one department to IT instead of having our IT department just collaborate with IT from throughout the county and doing training and doing security evaluations?
Chairman Peters, I believe it really boils down to accountability. Even if we were to work in a collaborative type of environment, the issue still stands today in which I don't have line of sight into those assets. I don't know how old those assets are. I don't know to what degree they've been patched. I don't know what potential security compromises we might have to deal with. I think it's really critical that when you deal with wall-jack-back activities, that you have one central point of, you have one central individual that's responsible, that's accountable for that, for the management of those systems.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the CAO's office and their efforts to be proactive on this. I know that's something your office has been tasked with, and I know you've been trying to be forward-thinking about it, and I appreciate that. But also, as Mr. Alsop said, we have some outstanding leaders from our other departments, and I have to trust their experience in their own departments as well. And this is kind of a seemingly minor issue to me that it's risen to this level and has caused such a rift. And I think I'm most concerned with what is causing that, and I think it's lack of communication. And I'm not blaming anybody in particular for that, but that's something I think we need to be mindful of going forward. But as Mac and Mr. Alsop both said, it comes down to accountability, and I know your office has that overarching accountability for this, so I would trust you to accept that accountability and have the buck stop with you. But I would, if we are going to move forward with this, would like to suggest maybe that we bring this back in 3 months, 6 months, whatever is a fair time frame, and reevaluates, how much or what impact this has had, if it's been a net drawback, if this has been a net benefit. And as Mr. Evansina said, when actually Mr. Kaufman brought up service level accountability, I know that there hasn't been oversight from your department of the IT from different departments out there, but once we establish that baseline, if this goes through, can we come back and say, okay, we are hitting the mark, we're not hitting the mark, and kind of take another look at this and make sure this was the right move?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, we're happy to do that. Members of the board, we're happy to provide your board even beyond, whether it's 3 or 6 months, even beyond that. I think a regular reporting on IT, where we are as a county, the service that IT is providing, all of that, I think would be a good exercise to undertake together and in a coordinated way, and we're happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Alsop. Are there any other board comments?
Motion on staff's recommendation.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call vote?
Supervisor Peters,
Aye.
Supervisor Scribner,
Aye.
Supervisor Maggard,
Aye.
Supervisor Couch,
Nope.
Supervisor Perez.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion is approved, 4 ayes, 1 opposed. Supervisor Couch.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Having no additional items to consider, I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn to Tuesday, February 23rd at 9 a.m.
Motion.
We are adjourned.